Today on Cathedral Talk, we're going to be having a more visually oriented episode than usual. So we highly encourage you to take a look at the screenshots that we've rendered for my new build on the Acropolis of Athens. You can find them right on our Cathedral Talk website, and the link will be in the very top of our show notes. And now, on with the show. Hey, what do you guys think of my new skin?
Yeah.
It's purple.
Yeah.
It's very purpley.
I'm not looking at Discord. I don't want to see your skin.
I went for sort of an Olympian god sort of character. I combined a couple different skins together to create this character.
Minecraft skin. Oh, okay.
So we're on a Minecraft server right now.
I have no idea what I look like. What do I look like?
You are a red shirt. You're about to die.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, you're wearing a Star Trek Voyager uniform.
Yeah, I died. I think God killed me.
I think he did.
He?
Where'd you go?
Spawn, I
You
guess.
spawn on the bridge, I think.
You killed me.
There he is. Well, welcome to my land. This land I call New Elysium. And Zack has set up a temporary server for me from my single-player map. But as you can see, we've got a lot of the buildings we've talked about before in here. We've got Notre Dame over here, and got the Pantheon, and we got Amiens and Salisbury over there. But we got a big old new structure over here. So if you want to follow me this way, what do we got over here, gentlemen?
Something that's not Notre Dame 2.2 scale.
That is true.
Is this just the ruins in Athens?
Well, it's not a ruin.
Not here.
It's the thing, the real thing.
I forget what the place is called in Athens, but
It is the Acropolis.
the Acropolis, yes. Thank you.
The Acropolis. Yes.
This is, okay, this is big. This is quite large.
Yes.
So this is not only the Acropolis, but like a cityscape around it?
I mean, all of it is sort of this complex that built up over many centuries, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, the Acropolis citadel on top of the rock itself, and then with a lot of sort of buildings built on its southern slope, which we'll talk about too.
So are you claiming that the term Acropolis is referring to the entire complex, not just the most famous building?
I mean, I suppose the Acropolis is definitely referring to the entire citadel within the fortress on the top of the hill.
Right.
You could probably argue and say that the buildings right on the southern slope aren't exactly directly part of the Acropolis, but I mean, if you look at a lot of maps of the Acropolis, these buildings are so important in the Athenian history that they're generally kind of all lumped together.
So is this a cathedral? Where's the cathedral?
There is no cathedral here.
Where's the narthex?
The narthex, well, here, why don't you meet me at the Propylaea,
Bless you.
which is sort of on the big grand entrance.
Ah, well, I was teleported to it.
That works. One of the things that was a big challenge to get me to build this was figuring out how to do all sorts of various different sizes of columns. And I think you've seen me talk a little bit before about using wall blocks to make slightly thinner than 2x2 columns, which is what I use for the Parthenon, the biggest temple on the top of the hill. But I've did a lot of other tricks too in this texture pack we've got running. The columns of this entrance at the front of the Acropolis, called the Propylaea, is made of just single blocks, but they're surrounded by trapdoors that are textured with sort of a custom texture I did for quartz pillars, just to make them a little bit thicker, to give them a little bit more depth, and to make them feel just a little bit more round too.
Is the chicken accurate?
I thought I killed all the chickens. I'm not sure why there's another chicken here.
There's a cow, too.
Oh, there's a cow too.
I
Yeah.
guess they escaped the avian bird flu.
Is that in Greece?
I think it's everywhere.
This is probably the hardest to narrate Minecraft tour that we've had, at least of your builds.
Yeah.
Because this is sprawling, and I don't think we've really, thus far, really explained what we're looking at other than the Acropolis and a bunch of other buildings.
Yep. So, I mean, what is the Acropolis, right? The Acropolis is the larger fortress citadel that I think most people know what the Parthenon is, that famous Greek temple, very rectangular with all the colonnades. And of course, it's a ruin today. All of this is a ruin today. None of it has survived fully intact. But the Acropolis was a citadel that had not only the Parthenon on top, but lots of other Greek temples and shrines throughout it. And it also changed a lot over time. The form that I'm looking at here is largely from a particular point in time that is actually the Roman period.
And so what I'm seeing is a giant hill mountain thing with a walled fortress, and that's where the Parthenon is. The Parthenon is referring just to the singular building, is that right?
Yeah, the Parthenon is just the classic temple, the biggest temple at the top.
Okay. And then that, which is what probably most people are picturing, is like that building is 10%, if even, of the total footprint of this. It's quite small in comparison to the total footprint of what you built, which is probably unexpected. And the mountain thing with the fortress is probably just shy of 50%.
Yep.
And then at the base of the mountain, you have another fortressy type thing. Another wall type aqueduct thing. It's long and straight, but wide.
Aqueduct.
Yeah. I'm just trying to give it at least some auditory visual imaging.
I'll tell you what that is in just a moment.
And then 2 amphitheaters. One that looks like half the Globe Theater.
Yeah. And
one that's like open air and even bigger, which it on its own is even considerably bigger than the Parthenon. And so that's all at the base of the mountain. And then random buildings here and there.
Well, here, I have an idea. Let's talk about this with a map. Come follow me. We'll return to this in just a moment, but I actually have a map room where I can give you the names to all these things. Everybody fly back to Notre Dame for just a moment.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Did you craft this mountain by hand?
I did.
That's silly.
I mean, I'd used world edit tools to speed up some terrain generation and smoothing, but a lot of it was also sculpted by hand too.
That must have been a new experience in terms of
yes.
Well, how precise were you, or was it? Because I know you love your spreadsheets and like making sure everything lines up. Is that you also did that via spreadsheet, or did you eyeball that more?
So I tried to be as faithful as I could with what limited resources I had. So the mountain itself is very much based on some modeling, 3D modeling I already looked at of the Acropolis, some Google Earth stuff, lots of photographic evidence. It's definitely not perfect. For example, the real Acropolis mountain kind of rests on a bit of an incline. And I wanted mine just for copy-paste purposes to be able to paste nice and evenly on a flat surface, for putting in different maps and stuff. So, it's certainly not perfect, but a lot of the shapes, especially on the north side, I worked really hard trying to sculpt them to get them to look just right, which, like you said, was a completely new experience for me, right? Because I'm all about, classical mathematics and the geometry of cathedrals and circles, natural stuff, totally out of my comfort zone. And so I worked really hard on kind of building up my skill set to do it.
How in total approximate percentage time of this project, how much of it was doing the mountain versus doing the buildings?
That's a hard question to answer, but I would say the whole project was about, the actual construction was about 9 months, but there were some intermittent breaks in there, and I probably spent about, probably 1.5 to 2 months on the rock hill part of it.
And you consider this whole thing 1-to-1 as well?
Yes, I tried very hard to get this to be 1-to-1. Everything in my world has been built as close to 1-to-1 without sacrificing, some of the artistic reasons.
Yeah,
as I can.
If you can think about, if you've seen Tom's original Notre Dame 1-to-1, the total, and this map room is helpful, thank you. we're looking at a flat map of what this world looks like from over top. So it gives a very easy frame of reference. The 1-to-1 Notre Dame build that's on this map is probably
not even a quarter.
Yeah, I was going to say about 20%.
Yeah,
the total area,
yep,
surface area that the Acropolis area is. So it's pretty sprawling.
Yeah, it's the biggest thing I've ever done. It was huge, and it was if people who, you know, the most dedicated of our fan base who have religiously checked our website each week to see what the latest updates at cathedraltalk.fm have been, might have noticed that under the Minecraft build section, I had a single photograph for Parthenon coming soon for like, I don't know, 3 years. And I kept just leaving it that way because I was like, I don't want this to just be the Parthenon. I want this to be the entire Acropolis. But I kept like just putting it off and off and off because I was like, that is going to be such a long and tedious project. And I finally just about a year and a half ago hunkered down and said, all right, no more delaying this. We're going to get this done because this was a real baby that I wanted to get done.
Well, you said 9 months.
On the decision to build this first,
Sure.
Obviously, you have two loves in Minecraft:
yep,
cathedrals and Greek Roman. It was always fairly obvious with the Colosseum, Pantheon, that Parthenon was going to be on that list.
Yep.
How early on did you decide to go full Acropolis versus just Parthenon? Was that like you're an insane person, so it's not that much of a leap of logic from what I know about you, but it is a huge step beyond the other things you've done. So I'm curious why this one of all ones you decide, no, you know what, it needs the whole thing.
Well, I originally built a Parthenon back in 2012, just in a single player world, and it was really scrappy. This is before I had really come up with any techniques to have more column variants than just 1x1 and 2x2.
It's also probably the plainest building of all of the ones that we talked about.
It is. Especially as far as Minecraft goes, you know, it's quite simple. The actual building is quite subtly detailed in all sorts of intricate ways.
Sure.
All sorts of sloping curves that are so mathematically rigorous that they're supposed to have like optical illusions and stuff, but you can't do that in Minecraft. So you have to kind of stick for the rectangular form that it's generalized as. But I first just built, you know, a scrappy little Parthenon that I stuck on a hill. And then slowly over time, as you do in Minecraft, you start iterating like, well, what can I do to make that better? And, you know, when I sort of came back from my long Minecraft hiatus around the pandemic in 2020, I was like, oh, I can make these columns much better if I use wall blocks. And, you know, I started to improve the roof. And then I stuck it on a new hill sitting next to Notre Dame in my single player world. And then it just sort of sat there and I just sort of kept looking at it longingly and like, it needs something more. It just needs something more. And I just finally was like, it just needs the whole Acropolis. And so I started long form planning to build this damn Acropolis. And yeah, it was a labor of love, and I'm quite pleased with the result. And of course, not only did I build the Acropolis, but I actually do have, it's not in this map right now on our server, but I do have a ruined form of it as well, just like I did for the Colosseum. So if you watch the YouTube video, you can see a transition between the ruined modern day form and this sort of apex of the classical Greek and Roman period.
I presume you did that in the same historical order if you built the full thing and then had fun messing with it.
Yeah. Let me just give you a little bit of vocabulary for some of the most important buildings here. Some of these words are really hard to read on the Minecraft map, but you might be able to see them if you get closer. We talked a little bit about the Propylaea, or Propylaea, I'm not sure which way you say it, but that's the grand entrance that's on the western face that's approaching it. I had to do a little bit of artistic license, especially with the Propylaea, because actually the Propylaea has had multiple forms over the centuries. When the Romans got a hold of it, they actually kind of put this weird zigzagging pattern on it, as you would kind of zigzag back and forth as you approached it, which was interesting, but looked really weird in Minecraft. And I just sort of preferred the classic straight stairway approaching the citadel. So, you know, I had to take a little bit of license there. And how some of the paths also connect is a little bit up to theory crafting. So again, the way I connected some of the roads and stuff is a little bit just speculation. But by and large, it's pretty close, I think, to what it probably would have been. But then after the Propylaea, we have, of course, the big Parthenon in the middle. but there's also the Erechtheion, which is the smaller temple that is just north of the Parthenon. And what's probably most famous about the Erechtheion is that it's got those 6 statues of women who are carved, like they're columns that are carved into statues of women, and they're holding up this sort of porch. And it's a very famous sort of classical image. And then you've got some of the lesser buildings around. You've got the Bororion, which is like sort of this, I think, little shrine to Artemis. You've also got this tiny little temple right off the side of the Propylaea called the Temple of Athena Nike. But then some of the biggest structures are actually not even on the Acropolis Citadel. We've actually got not 1, not 2, but 3 different theaters. The first of the 3 theaters is the probably most famous, the Theater of Dionysus, which is the open Greek amphitheater. Greek amphitheaters were much more natural, built into the slopes of hills and things. There's more well-preserved ones than the one today, the Theater of Dionysus.
I just learned this word, Odeon. So Odeon is the word for theater?
Yeah, Odeon is a word for theater. Yep.
I just built those in Civ 7.
Oh, did you really?
Yeah.
Nice. So then next to it, we've got the Odeon of Pericles, which is this very square building, which was built sort of at the time that the Parthenon was also being built in the age of Pericles. It was supposed to be the largest roofed building in Athens for a while because it's so huge. It's got tons of columns inside. We'll go in there in just a minute. And then this final theater that's really close to the Propylaea, the entrance, is the Odeon of Herodes Atticus, which is actually a Roman theater that was built later. And one of the reasons that I wanted to include it as well is its ruins are very prominent on the modern-day Acropolis today. The Odeon of Herodes Atticus, I also had to take some artistic license with, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And then you were asking a moment ago, what's that really long building that's kind of connecting all these theaters at the bottom? You called it an aqueduct. It's not an aqueduct. It's called the Stoa of Eumenes. Stoas are this interesting building form from the ancient Greek times that are these really long, kind of multi-purpose buildings where they would have shops and commercial and just pathways for people to shelter and enjoy the city, basically.
And get harassed by Stoics.
Yeah, these really long buildings that sort of connect everything. And it's just column after column after column.
Yeah, it does feel. I'll have to go walk through it back on the model again, but it does feel kind of like one of those long markets. I'm thinking of the one in Seattle. That name is escaping me.
Yep.
Where it's just like tons of little shops.
Yeah. So why don't we go on back outside and we can start to look at some of this in detail.
So I do not know the geography of Athens at all.
Yep.
Where is this in compared to the main city portions of Athens, both historically and modern day?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the whole city of Athens too well myself, but it's pretty centralized. It's like when you go to modern day Athens, the Acropolis is pretty smack dab in the middle, I think. I haven't been there myself personally, but it's pretty prominent. It certainly was the center of the ancient city, and by modern day standards, it's pretty prominent, and you can see it from a lot of vantage points all throughout modern day Athens as well.
I'm going to Google Parthenon.
Yeah, it's smack dab in the middle, pretty much, I think.
Parthenon Greek restaurant in Maryland. Got it. Okay. Yeah. Pretty downtown Chevy Chase, Maryland. Yep.
Nice.
Parthenon Nashville, Parthenon Arkansas.
Parthenon South Hadley, Massachusetts.
That is very central.
Yeah.
Oh, it's near an Olive Garden, which is also prominently displayed on Google Maps.
Right. Maybe we'll meet me at the top of the grand entrance again for the Propylaea.
All right. You need to now just build all of Athens. There's a lot of stuff around here.
There's a lot of stuff.
There's a temple of Hephaestus right next door. There's a Temple of Kronos.
Is he going to be done until he finishes the Olive Garden as well?
Yeah. It's several blocks out, so that could take a few years.
Oh, okay.
But you got to keep building concentric circles until you reach the Olive Garden.
Let's talk a little bit about the build order first, and sort of how I built things.
Mountain.
So the first thing I actually did was I built the citadel itself without the mountain. Basically, I just elevated the shape of the wall of the Acropolis first, put all the stuff in it, and then I built the mountain around it afterwards.
It's interesting. Why?
Well, because it's a lot easier to follow straight lines than sort of natural formations. And I was able to just superimpose a picture of the Acropolis on a spreadsheet and then copy blocks to follow the lines of the citadel walls. And then after that was done, I sort of could just work out from there. Always start easy and then build in the harder stuff as you go.
I bet the ancient Greeks would have also preferred to have built the entire citadel and then just raised it in the air magically and build the mountain underneath.
Yeah. So come on up here. This pathway here leads to the side of the Parthenon where you can see, of course, the statue of Athena. There's multiple statues of Athena, but probably the most famous one is inside the Parthenon. And then also that big bronze statue that's right in front of the Propylaea as well. That's also supposed to be another statue of Athena.
Wait a second.
Did you guys get lost already?
There's a lot to look at.
There is a lot to look at.
So Athena's inside?
Athena's inside.
Okay, yes.
Yep.
This is the same model you had in the past, right? Or you had something pretty close to this at least.
It is. I have certainly done subtle updates, like the floor has a lot more nuance to it now. I try to update things there. Like you said, when you're dealing with just a big rectangle with no windows, there's only so much you can do in Minecraft to really, spruce it up. So, I did my very best to give it quite a bit of character. And the Parthenon, in a lot of ways, is, I think, more importantly designed to look good from the outside than the inside.
Sure.
They cared very much about its exterior appearance, more so than a lot of later buildings like that the Romans built, for example. I mean, the inside was important too, but the Greeks were all about optimizing that perfect look from the outside. And then we got this smaller little temple over here. You can see like there's this little porch off to the side. You guys actually should, this is worth a Googling. Look up the Erechtheion or the Caryatids on Google real quickly. You'll see the picture of the 6 statues of women columns. I'm curious if that's familiar to you.
Erechtheion. Okay. Cool.
Yeah. It's probably the second most famous thing on the Acropolis right after the Parthenon itself.
I'm getting wet.
Here, I'll make it stop raining.
It's raining.
Here, I'll stop the sun too. Here, 1 second.
What?
Sun, I command you to stop.
Do you think those women have headaches?
I mean, it's a pretty heavy porch. It's a lot of marble. So I built that, and then I built, a lot of these smaller buildings around there. Getting the levels of the different grounds was probably one of the hardest parts of the Citadel itself. Just like what's this jigsaw, right, of these different tiers?
Yeah.
Because it's not just a flat top on top of the Citadel. You've got this lower level, and then you got this sort of green area that's raised a bit. But, getting it all to fit together nicely is really tricky.
So the biggest question is, who's a good boy?
This doggy right here.
Who's a good boy?
I've seen different examples where like there were
Who's a good boy?
assortments of different statues here, and I thought I saw one of a doggy that was here. It's quite possible maybe the Romans put one there since they're all about Roman wolves. But I just figured, doggy, let's put a doggy right there. Why not?
Doggy.
Yeah.
Pretty good doggy Minecraft statue.
Yeah. The thing that, in my opinion, really truly makes or breaks a build, especially like this one, are the roofs. It's all about the roofs. You see so many builds out there in the Minecraft community at large, some pretty impressive structures people put together, and then it sometimes just feels like people get tired and they just slap a pretty simple roof on top. And it just ruins it so much of the time. And so I just put so much effort into making the roofs interesting and not just be like these simple plain things. I try to break up the planes with lots of crisscrossing shapes that sort of mimic the trusses that are underneath them. And I mean, starting with the Parthenon roof itself, I really love the Parthenon roof. That's a slope of 1 to 3. And the way that the blocks are recessed just right kind of gives it a little bit of an illusion of tiles.
Oh yeah,
tiles that are kind of going back and forth.
I see how you did this with the alternating stairs.
Yep.
Yeah, no, that is an effective use of making it look like tiles. And I mean, like you said, if the Greeks' intent were to make it look pleasing on the outside, it makes sense to pay attention.
Yeah. Well, in fact, the Parthenon had a marble roof. Can you believe it? That's pretty unheard of. By most construction standards, it's pretty common to build a building out of marble in fancy temples, but to actually put a marble roof on top of it, that's pretty extravagant. Of course, it's a wooden set of trusses that's holding it up. There's no vaults or anything like in a cathedral. That technology hadn't been invented yet. but the tiling on top was marble, which would have been very expensive and very ornate.
And heavy, I presume, compared?
Yeah, it would have been pretty heavy. Yep.
Wonder if this has anything to do with, the fact that it collapsed.
Wasn't that warfare related?
Yeah. So there was one roof that burned down sort of at the end of the Classical Age. But at the end of the Classical Age, they built a second roof on top that was a little bit smaller. It didn't quite cover the whole thing. But that roof actually lasted about 1,000 years. It was a surprisingly stable wooden roof. And only it was destroyed when the Parthenon sustained major damage during the war, and actually the year was 1687. By then, the Parthenon in Greece was controlled by the Ottoman Empire, and the Venetians were attacking Athens at the time. And the Ottomans had decided to store all their gunpowder inside the Parthenon, and one Venetian cannon strike hit it just right and detonated the whole thing and destroyed the roof and left it with the cavernous hole that we see today. That's just the remnants of the ruin of the Parthenon.
Man, what a way to go.
Yeah.
It's a good story.
They just detonated it. They just blew up. They're trying to rebuild the Parthenon to some extent today. They've had this ongoing project, the Acropolis project, which has been going on for, 30, 40 something years. I don't know. And I don't know if it'll really ever be done. Their goal isn't to completely rebuild it, but they're kind of reassembling all the columns that were destroyed. And I don't know, they might even be trying to reassemble some of the inner cella with that held the statues and stuff too. I'm not certain.
I mean, if something were ever had to happen to the National Cathedral, like an earthquake, it's boring. But filling the entire thing with gunpowder and then shooting a cannon at it, that's epic. I'd be willing to see what the National Cathedral would look like after that. Make it happen.
I also just really like the coloring of a lot of these other roofs. I really like the play between the mud bricks and the polished granite. I think it's a very nice color. A lot of other people use like orange,
terracotta,
sandstone, or terracotta for a lot of these roofs, and that color is just a little too jarring for me. I like the more gentle colors of just the sort of brown and red.
You did a good job with these roofs, making them busy in a good way, while also having a pattern, just a very complex pattern.
Yeah. And I think my best roofs, aside from maybe the Parthenon itself, are actually down on the lower level. So why don't we go on down out of the citadel and let's go down and let's look at the three different theaters, and we'll start with the Theater of Dionysus, which is the middle one. That's the outdoor amphitheater. And actually, while we travel over there, you can take a quick jaunt through the extremely long stoa, which is just column upon column, and you can kind of imagine how I didn't decorate the inside of it too much, but you can imagine how there would just been tons of shop vendors.
Fresh fish.
Yeah, commercial.
Buy your fresh fish.
Exactly. And so then we arrive at the Theater of Dionysus. And of course, I've had a lot of experience making amphitheaters, like with the Colosseum and stuff before, so I just put those skills to use and got the shapes just right.
I imagine this was a relatively despite being huge, was probably one of the simpler things for you to do.
It was, yeah. This didn't take a lot of thought. I just spreadsheeted it out and got it done in a few days. That wasn't too hard. Really, the harder part was actually, because you notice that it's like you cut off the circles at sort of odd spaces, right? Because it's not just pure circles. It's like you sort of cut off the circles at these different points surrounding it. And then there's even a cut off on this right angle side where the Theater of Pericles intersects with it. Just getting that all to fit together, that's the tricky part.
Yeah.
And then the stage itself, there's a variety of different concept arts out there. Nobody really knows what the stage exactly looked like. So I just picked one of the pieces of theory crafting art that people had come up with that I liked and gave it a little bit of my own artistic flair as well. And of course, the whole theater is at a little bit of a tilt, right, from the plane of the Acropolis. In fact, really, if you look at almost every building in this entire thing, there's almost no buildings that are on the Minecraft grid directly, right? Really, in fact, it's really just the Propylaea and the Parthenon that are exactly right angles with the grid of Minecraft. Almost every other building is at some kind of slant, including the Theater of Dionysus itself. It's at a slight slant, too.
Mm-hmm.
That's impressive because it's obvious when you say that, but I don't even want to say that. It blends in well. Normally, things in Minecraft that are not on the grid are jarring in a way that It's probably that yours is not, which I imagine is just partially because it's so big that it effectively motion blur, like it pixelizes, so you can see it in a more zoomed out sense.
Yeah. Zach, have you ever looked at any of those build the earth constructions on the internet? A lot of buildings are kind of like this, where people build stuff off the grid.
Yeah, the Loosest of Gooses has an interview with the lead dev for Build the Earth in Minecraft. It's pretty interesting if you want to go watch that interview about the process that they have for going from like algorithmically generated buildings to putting them in a worker queue so that volunteers can pick them out of a queue and work on it. And then they have like a review phase and before they're finally adopted into the main map. Pretty interesting.
Yeah.
I think they're about 5% done with New York City right now.
Yeah.
Which is pretty amazing.
Build the Earth. They're building the Earth.
Basically. I thought you were about to say 5% done with the Earth, and I'm like, wow, really?
No,
we're not even close to 5% of the Earth.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's what I thought you were saying too. Got it.
That is funny, though. One thing with Build the Earth I've never been entirely certain about is, like, it's not that they're literally connecting everything, because you couldn't, right? You can't actually connect in Minecraft all these things and make a sphere, right?
That wasn't covered in the interview, so I'm not entirely sure. I know they have different areas that you can teleport to that correspond to different sections of the Earth, but I don't know how they're connected. I don't know if you can just walk from LA to New York.
You're right. I mean, I obviously you have to either go with some non-Euclidean geometry with some kind of weird, crazy mod that connects all the blocks together, which I highly doubt that they did, because that would be crazy.
They are kind of crazy.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they did. But having just different maps that all connect would probably make the most logical sense on how they did it. All right, so do you want to enter this very square building right next to the Theater of Dionysus? This is the Theater of Pericles.
Are we going to do another PvP battle in here?
That would be pretty fun.
This is like perfect.
This building might actually have been my favorite thing to build out of this entire process. I really enjoyed building this build. It's a perfect square, but of course, again, it's a square that's at a tilt. So, I had to get the tilt just right. It's got a lot of columns. All the columns had to be at a certain tilt too. The technology when this building was built was very primitive. They didn't have like vaults. They didn't have the technology to span wide distances to cover a big chamber with a vast roof. They had to use lots of columns to keep it up. So that's why you see this very complicated web of just wood trusses and things that's all holding it up. And there's also just, again, some artistic interpretation. Did it have this extra sort of cupola opening on the top? Some say yes, some say no. It looks way cooler with it, so I built it, But it's just a cool building because of the axis that it's on. And again, if you fly outside, I think it probably, in my opinion, has the coolest roof out of all the roofs I build. I just love the roof on the Theater of Pericles. The way that all the lines intersect together. I'm really proud of it.
You should be.
I'm contemplating what you're saying about they didn't have the technology of vaulting, and this is no small feat of engineering on their part, even if they don't have that tech, right? Clearly building this was an impressive thing, and it's an interesting evolution of technology question that, when-ish was this built?
Let's see here. I don't have the exact date for the Odeon of...
Approximately.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been built roughly contemporary with the Parthenon, I think. So that'd have been roughly around 440 BC.
Okay, so we're talking 1,500 years until people invent vaults. Is that right?
Well, the Romans built vaults, but that was at the sort of the late stage of their classical empire. So really, Roman vaults start to appear maybe around the 1st century BC.
Okay, so hundreds of years at the very least.
Yeah, maybe a good 300 years or so, yeah.
It is interesting to think that, in the grand scheme of human history, a few hundred years doesn't seem like a lot, but obviously that is a lot. That's many, many generations of people. Interesting how much of a leap that is from this, that it doesn't feel like it's that big of a leap, but just if you haven't figured out the core mathematics of that, then you assume it won't work, because I guess vaults don't seem commonsensical necessarily.
Also, trusses do a lot of work, even contemporaneous with us.
Sure.
There's still a lot of reliance on trusses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The slope of this roof is very gradual. It's, I think, a slope of 1 to 4. And I used, of course, slab blocks and stair blocks to partially do that, but I also incorporated a texture for some trap doors to sort of even out tiling to make it even more interesting. So you see all the trap doors on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like the effect of that.
Okay, I understand why you felt it was important for a texture pack to be turned on.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if that was all just like normal textures of trap doors, it would look a lot funnier.
Are you able to have multiple textures for trapdoors on a server like this, or do all trapdoors now look the same?
Well, there's lots of different kinds of trapdoors. So specifically, I forget what these trapdoors are.
Jungle.
Yeah, that's jungle wood trapdoors.
Got it. Okay.
But I have gone kind of crazy with my trapdoor textures.
This is pretty technical, maybe a little bit too technical for the podcast, but there's a lot of work in like the last month or two to really beef up the capabilities of resource packs. And it's going to be really possible to change the textures of things based off of the data of the block. And so you should be able to have a single trapdoor have a bunch of different textures depending on its data.
Oh, interesting. So like that data would be based on like where it's placed or how it's oriented or something?
The thing that's most interesting to me is tagging. And so like when you like give yourself a trapdoor into your inventory, you can go into the creative menu and you can click it and you can drag it.
Wow.
Or you can do like a /give command.
Yeah.
Like Tom, when you're building this, when you want a jungle trapdoor, how do you put the jungle trapdoor in your inventory to place?
Well, in creative mode, I type in search for jungle trapdoor and then I click and drag it into my action bar.
Yeah. You don't use the give command, right?
Not usually. Only for blocks I can't search for, like light blocks and stuff.
You should be able to do that if the settings of the server are correct.
Okay. Here, do you want me to give myself a jungle trapdoor? I mean, I know how to do it. I just don't do it very often.
No. The point is when you're in the command line, you can do a whole bunch of stuff to the give. You can very easily set the amount. So you can give yourself 5.
Right.
But that's very trivial. You can add a whole bunch of different attributes that you want onto the jungle trapdoor when you give yourself it. And then you can target blocks that have certain attributes to have certain textures on them. So maybe when you're in the creative menu and you pull jungle trapdoor into your inventory, you just get a jungle trapdoor, untextured. But maybe if you use a give command, you can give yourself a granite textured jungle trapdoor or the mud brick textured trapdoor.
That's really exciting. I'm really eager to, because one of the things I've always feared, like if I were to, for example, turn this map into a multiplayer server sometime with more people, it's like, I don't know, people want to play with all these custom textures, but it'd be nice to know that they wouldn't have to necessarily be locked into the textures I used for the specific build. They could still have the default ones if they wanted them.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's something I'm thinking about for our multiplayer server is I'm recreating a D&D module and I want to be able to have like copper pieces and silver pieces and platinum pieces, but people still need to be able to use iron ingots on the server. So how do we have that kind of currency that looks like currency?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
And for the texture pack that we're currently looking at, Tom, you drew these by hand or found someone online who had already done it?
So most of them are based off of either pre-existing textures. I'm not very good at drawing textures. I tend to take pre-existing stuff and then maybe changing the hues or modifying a little bit. I don't think this is exactly, but this is very closely based off of the brown mushroom block, because the brown mushroom block already just in the vanilla game blends perfectly with mud bricks.
Sure.
And so I sort of turned that texture into the trapdoor. It's not exactly, it is a little bit different than a brown mushroom block, but it's pretty darn close. I use these a lot in the Salisbury build when we looked at Salisbury over a year ago too.
Salisbury steak.
Yeah.
Keen-eared listeners of this podcast will remember a conversation we had very early on about Tom's opinions on using blocks that were not the right block just for the texture.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have been on a journey. I've taken a little sojourn, and I am definitely more coming around to using blocks for how they look and less about what their original intended function was. I'm not all the way there. I'm still a traditionalist in some ways, but I definitely am more open-minded, which is good. it's been a fun journey.
So that means that you are therefore okay now with the Lego bonsai tree that you gave me for Christmas, where the pink flowers on the tree are represented by pink Lego frogs?
I'm not certain if I'm more or less happy that I know that. I kind of wish you hadn't told me, and then you could have just showed me, and then I would have just looked at it weirdly a few more times and have been like, wait a minute.
Pink frogs.
You've spoiled me, so now I just know.
It's a bonsai tree of pink frogs.
Yeah. Why don't we take a quick journey to the final theater, which is back over to the Propylaea. This building here, this final theater, the Odeon of Herodes Atticus, this was probably the hardest building to build. It was a tricky devil. And in fact, I got so frustrated with it. There was definitely I spent 1 month just playing a little bit of World of Warcraft because I was like, I need to take a break. Several reasons why it was tricky. It's at a slant. Again, it's at a very notable slant, so it's angled. And again, building anything at an angle is always a lot trickier. It's got, of course, the same theater concentric circles, except this is contained inside. That itself isn't hard.
And this is the one, for people listening, that I said at the beginning, is somewhat akin to the Globe Theater.
Yeah, it is somewhat akin to the Globe Theater. It is the biggest and most notable Roman construction that was built by the Romans kind of when they took over Greece and stuff. And you can see that it's got a very different technology in it, right? We just looked at the Odeon of Pericles, and that building, which was built hundreds of years before, had lots of columns that were needed to hold up the roof. Now, there is definitely some artistic license, again, with this building too. It is generally known that the Odeon of Herodes Atticus had a wooden roof of some kind, and a lot of the illustrations online, which are again subjective or theory crafting, displayed the roof being held up with beams and various things. Most of them have the entire building completely covered. I decided to have this big opening. I didn't find a whole lot of evidence that there was an opening, but on the other hand, you can't really disprove that it didn't have an opening, and I kind of just went for the cool factor. I like the opening. It just looks cool that way. So again, that's a little bit of Tom artistic license, but to some extent, it did have some kind of wooden roof. And again, it would have been a lot more open on the inside without needing lots of columns to hold up whatever roof was up there. So you can see, there was a different stage in the technology when this building was built.
What would you have wanted to see in this theater?
They actually still put on theater productions to this day. This theater is probably the most intact of the three. The Odeon of Pericles is completely gone. There's nothing left. And the theater of Dionysus, the oldest one, is there, but it is very grassy and not much left of the amphitheater. Whereas the Odeon of Herodes Atticus, the walls are mostly down, but the amphitheater part is still largely intact. So to this day, they actually do show a lot of productions still at this theater. I don't know exactly what's put on here. I imagine a lot of traditional stuff, but you never know.
Hamilton?
Yeah, Hamilton. I don't know. So yeah, and again, also the roof on this one is also kind of uses that similar trapdoor scheme, except in circles to get the shape of the very gradual roof that's inclined up it. And then you've got all the radii that are intersecting around it. Again, how did they get the radii to space so cleanly? Again, spreadsheets. Using spreadsheets and even using just line tools to sort of drag lines where they needed to go and then to approximate where blocks would need to go. Won't do it today, but I did have an extensive spreadsheet, as you can imagine, that I used to put all this together.
I got confused in what you're saying because I think at some point you said, how did they do it? And you said spreadsheets, and then I was trying to...
Oh, they used Excel too.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry. Well, and of course, then there's the one other part of this build that I'm glad you haven't really commented on yet, because I'm hoping that means that my blending job was quite good. But there's a lot of other custom things that I had to build all around it. Have you noticed the custom trees?
Absolutely.
Huh?
I was thinking about asking you if any of them in a Tolkien sense had names or histories or...
No. Well, okay, actually, there is one tree. Actually, fly back to the top of the citadel. If you fly back over to the Erechtheion with the statues, there is an olive tree in the center of this tiny little courtyard. And this is supposed to be a very famous olive tree that theoretically was planted by the goddess Athena. And the ancient Greeks would tend to this tree and keep it nurtured because it was, a gift from the gods, a gift from the goddess.
And this tree is in a garden, right?
Yeah, of some kind.
This Olive Garden?
Ah, we found it. You already built it.
Yeah, it's the Olive Garden. Yep.
It's the Olive Garden.
Where are my breadsticks? I've never actually eaten at an Olive Garden.
It's good.
Is it?
I haven't before, actually. I don't think I have, yeah.
Well, you don't like salads, so.
Yeah. Basically, I've got two kinds of custom trees. I've got the olive trees that you see right here, that are just very small trees, shaped trees. But the biggest difference is I use wood fences, spruce fences, rather than full log blocks because they're very slender and delicate trees. But then you've got just tons and tons of these cypress trees, which make use of, I think, spruce leaves in addition to more spruce fences as their bases. I think there are about maybe about 8 different custom trees, 8 different shapes of cypress trees and about 8 different olive trees. But then I place them all around the map, and to get them to be as varied as possible, they're all rotated at various angles. So even though there's only, let's say, 8 models of a cypress tree, the fact that they're all rotated randomly, like 90 degrees this way, 90 degrees that way, gives them another sense of a unique feel so that it doesn't feel like you just copied pasted everything.
That's similar to how the Build the Earth does it as well. They have like a gallery of trees that you can go and visit and just pick out like, I think this is a good maple tree. And maple doesn't exist in Minecraft, but the tree wizards have created something that looks similar to a maple tree. And you're like, that maple tree will look good.
Yes. Well, and as you can kind of see here, this entire forest is custom.
Mm-hmm.
It's not directly what I consider part of the Acropolis build, but it was so important to me that I have this lovely northern forest that you could then sort of fly around and watch the Acropolis rock rising out of. Because there's a lot of great artwork of just shots like that. And so it just, that right there was another like 2 to 3 months of just building this damn forest.
Just placing trees?
Well, the trees were fairly easy because that probably took a few weeks because it was a lot of trees to place. But the landscaping, cleaning off the land, smoothing it out, making it connect with the original landscape of the world. And then this water formation, like you see this northern lake that we're right above right now. The northern half of the lake is natural. The bottom half of the lake is completely artificial. I just wanted to have a big body of water here. That's not really a body of water here in the real world. This is now kind of leading into how I wanted to connect my Acropolis build with the rest of my world. So I just wanted everything to feel very naturalistic, and I built all this water with, again, some world edit tools to smooth things out and stuff. But that was, again, a long process as well.
I think World Edit lets you make a brush out of a tree, and so you can click and it'll place a whole tree for you.
I did try some of that. I did make custom brushes, and I did try it specifically with trees. The one issue, and maybe somebody who's more savvy at World Edit than me can tell me how to do this better, but the issue with the brush, at least that I was having, was that when you click the brush, it centers the center of the object on what you're clicking on. So if you're clicking, I want to place a tree like on this plot of ground, it plots the tree, the center of the tree, on the ground into the ground. And that's not what I want. I want to click the tree so that its base is on the ground and then it's rising out of the ground. But it wasn't placing the trees quite right. Now, maybe I did something wrong. Maybe there's another custom brush setting and I just didn't do it right. There's a lot more tech savvy people than me, but I found it plenty easy enough with just copy paste, where I would just copy a tree and then have it copy it right next to my position. And I would just fly around and just drop down and paste the tree and fly up some more and place the tree. And yeah, it was a little tedious. It took a month or two, but I got it done.
Johnny Appleseed, Paul Bunyan. Which one of them plants trees? Do they both plant trees?
I don't remember. On the subject of trees, too, I don't know if you saw it, but I really like this little pathway, which is also just a custom little pathway. If you go to the Stoa, their super long building again, if you go in front of the Stoa at kind of where it meets up at a right angle with this other temple, do you see this kind of S-curved snaky path with all the cypress trees that kind of snake around? I really like this path.
Yeah. Your pathing is quite nice.
Yeah.
I mean, now knowing that you planted all of those trees by hand, I further underscore that you are an insane person.
Yep.
But it does look natural. I did not grok for a second that wasn't just part of the auto generation of the game.
I appreciate that. And again, like I said, this whole experience really pushed my learning curve quite a bit. This is definitely the hardest thing I've done. Not necessarily in terms of like complexity of just how all the shapes like of a very complicated cathedral fit together. But the thing is, a cathedral just makes sense in my head. I understand how it's supposed to work. So that's just in that way easier. Whereas like all the tools that I have to do all that just don't always work when it came to something like this. I had to do a lot of, approximations when I was building the mountain. Oh, one more thing I wanted to say about building the mountain too. I did use, again, some brushes to expedite placing some of the stone for the mountain. But again, I had to carve out a lot of the mountain by hand too, just to get it to look right. But do you notice how there's some sprinkling of grass all over sort of the top to simulate some of the, moss and grass that is on top of the rock?
Yes.
This was a really fun technique that I enjoyed. And Zach, I think I've showed this to you once.
Yeah, but World Edit isn't on the server, so you can't show it to David.
I can't do it right now. That's okay. But the way that this would work is you can make a brush and have it drop any particular block you want. And so you can do like different shapes like spheres and discs and cylinders and stuff. So I made a brush that would do a disc of sand. And I would click the sand right above the rock. And the thing about sand is it's affected by gravity. So the gravity would have the sand from the disc all just fall right on top of that place of the mountain. And then I would just repeatedly click and drop all this sand all over the mountain. And then you could use World Edit to prune it a little bit and clean it up. But then you could swap out all the sand for grass and moss. And so you get this kind of layered sense of the greenery on top of the rock. So that was a really fun technique. I enjoyed that too.
I enjoy the sentence. The thing about sand is it's affected by gravity.
One of the few things in this game that is.
That's true.
I have a question looking at your overall map. You were talking earlier about how you did not build everything on the grid, and so I'm actually going down to your map room to compare again.
Yeah.
When I'm looking, maybe it's just the way that the angle of flying around, it must be something about how the viewing works, because I'd swear that your Notre Dame, which is immediately adjacent to all this, does not seem to be in the same grid as your Parthenon.
Really? Because those should be the same. They are.
Yeah, okay. When I go to the map room, it definitely is. But I guess this just must be a forced perspective thing about where you're flying.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, it really makes it seem like they're at a V of some sort, which would be insane. And so I was going to ask a question about that. But I guess, yeah, it's just something weird about how viewing works.
Yeah. Some little optical effect there. I mean, the Stoa is at a very precise angle. And so when you look at how the Stoa is at an angle as opposed to the way the Parthenon is, it just kind of, it just gives that little optical effect. Also, if you've got your viewing angle at the default for Minecraft, that can stretch the image quite a bit. I usually turn mine down to 45 because that stretches things less.
Wait, you're in the map room with me, right?
I am.
Yeah.
Okay. Walk on the map for the amount of forest you made.
Okay. So over here, and then kind of all around here. And then this kind of wraps around about over here.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of forest.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay, so if we keep this in, you heard me say that the Acropolis main mountain, the Notre Dame footprint is about 20% of that. The Acropolis footprint is maybe about 20% of the forested landscape that Tom just walked around.
Yeah. Well, and after that was done, after another month or two, I was like, well, there's a lot of other landscapes on the map in general that really need to get fine-tuned. So I ended up redoing a lot of the landscape around over here. By the way, there's a building over here that we're not going to talk about today. After the Acropolis was finally complete, the project was finally complete, I was like desperate for oxygen. So I was like, I have to build a cathedral right now. So I just built another cathedral. And we'll talk about this cathedral in the future.
You have one that is your job, ostensibly.
Yeah, but I wanted to build this one. So I just sort of quickly built this one in like about a month. It was like, fresh air. because, I just needed to get away from the naturalistic stuff and go back to my roots.
You could have completed the 2-to-1 build by like 4 times by now.
Yeah, well, you know what? It's next on my to-do list. We're getting real close. It is.
Is it?
It is.
Is it?
It's like item number 2.
Do all the other cathedrals as item number 1.
Yeah, I'm really pleased with how this world's coming out. Do you see this body of water in the map room that's to the south? I will tell you this now as a preview of long-term things to come. Now that I've had the practice with the naturalistic setting of the Acropolis, I feel more empowered to try more things that have a natural feel to them mixed with architecture. And so what I'm going to put in this body of water down here...
The Lost City of Atlantis.
Nope. I'm going to put down here a Mont Saint-Michel.
Yeah, that's what I said. The Lost City of Atlantis.
I'm going to put a Mont Saint-Michel down here sometime in a few years, and it's going to be fantastic. I am very excited about that.
What's the footprint of that compared to Notre Dame?
I was actually looking at this not long ago. It's comparable to the Acropolis.
It's pretty big.
Probably about the same size as the Acropolis. Taller, more mountainous, although a little bit more circular, whereas the Acropolis is, more stretched out, a little more rectangular.
Insane.
Well, take a quick little pause on Minecraft, and since we don't have access to it in the game right now, I also want to quickly have you look at some of the screenshots for the ruin. Could you go to the Cathedral Talk website, Cathedral Talk FM, go over to the Minecraft tab, scroll on down to the Acropolis, and then scroll to the bottom with all the screenshots. You will see lots of different shots, first of the Acropolis itself, but as you go farther down, you'll start to see the ruined version. And I want you to do some comparison and contrasting there.
There's a lot of pros.
Yeah, a lot of scrolling.
Yeah.
I see the forward phrase somewhere in here is, what can I say? I'm like, yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
That sums up most of this. Oh, I see. Yep. This is all that computing power going into these 4K images that you've been creating,
David,
nonstop for years.
They're not 4K.
Sorry, 8K.
They're 8K images.
Because, everyone and their mother has 8K screens.
It's not just about making it match the screen. It's about making it so that when you zoom in to look at some detail, you don't lose fidelity.
You're also not appreciating what Tom wants you to appreciate, which is these are using distant horizons, and he handcrafted the mountains in the background.
Yes. Actually, these screenshots were actually made with Chunky, which is not an in-game renderer. It's an out-of-game renderer. But yes, distance horizons can also do some of the mountains in the background. That's one thing that I didn't talk about. Now, the mountains I didn't create by hand.
They're not auto-generated.
They're not auto-generated. If you look at one of those first mountains, it's like one of the first, it's like the 4th or 5th image down. It's like that mountain that's sort of reminiscent of Mount Rainier, just one massive solo mountain. I used a program that a lot of people use called World Painter. And you can get custom brushes for World Painter to basically paint a mountain. And the one thing about World Painter is you have to do that and then build the world around it. And I couldn't do that because I already had the world existing. So I had to copy segments of the mountain that I created with the World Painter into my map and then texture it up. So that was also a lengthy process. And then there's a separate mountain range in some of these photographs, which is actually naturally generated mountains from the game, but they're not from this map. They're actually from a different map that I really like. And I was like, well, I really want that mountain range in my map. So I spent a few weeks in the summer just copying one section of this mountain range and another section of this mountain range until I got it all into my map. You can see some of that mountain range in the very last screenshot at the very bottom, the one with the very orange horizon with the ruin of the Acropolis.
So I'm starting to look at some of these ruins. Okay, and as much as I make fun of you and your electricity bill for the amount of time you have a computer running truly 24/7 to render 8K images, it's like you are actually allowing for that thing in police procedurals where they look at an image and say, enhance, and you zoom in like, oh wait, you actually can in this case. You actually can zoom all the way in and look at block by block, which is, okay, I'll admit, useful in this very specific context.
Yes, it's quite aesthetically pleasing. I like to zoom in and enhance.
So, okay, the first thing of note in the ruins is you change texture. Like it goes from a whitish stone to a yellowish stone.
Right. That goes from quartz blocks to sandstone.
Did you do that by hand, or did you do like a conversion thing?
There's an easy conversion that you can do with World Edit, where you can say, take all quartz blocks, replace them with sandstone blocks of various sorts. That's pretty easy. Although, again, a lot of the shapes change with the ruins, so you have to customize the shapes by hand and stuff.
Sure.
But yeah, the actual swapping out of the textures is not hard. Yeah.
I'm just constantly calibrating the level of insane my brother is.
I understand. No, I did not build it and then build it from scratch a second time. That would be too much. I'm getting better and better at using the tools to do it. And that's actually one of the things that actually I'm kind of tickled by, because that, if I understand it correctly, that is kind of what happens with marble. If you look at the Acropolis project, where they've been rebuilding the Parthenon on the Acropolis, trying to putting stuff back together. Of course, some of the marble is just lost to time, and so they've needed to source new marble to replace lost marble when they've reassembled some of these columns. And so you'll notice that the new marble is a lot whiter, and the ancient marble from the original Parthenon is much more kind of this, not yellow, but the kind of color of the sandstone I got. And so over time, you could see how the marble would change. And they say that in the Acropolis project, in the real world, that eventually, the new marble they've added will start to mirror and match the color of the original ancient marble. If you actually go back to the original pristine version from, ancient Greece and ancient Romans, did you notice along the edge of the wall, around the edge of the Acropolis, that you can actually see that there is a gradient between some of the quartz, which slowly transitions into sandstone?
Yeah, I did notice that. I like that.
Yeah, thanks. That was to simulate that probably some of those earliest walls were already starting to transition into that other color. And so it kind of gives a more natural flow, especially when you then switch the map from the pristine version to the ruined version. And if you wouldn't mind letting me just maybe spend 6 minutes right now watching the video that I recorded for this thing, because the video was another 4 or 5 months of my life, because the video put together all the technologies of distant horizons and multiple image layering to get the view from the thing to work just right. If you guys would quickly click on the link to the YouTube video, which you can see on the same page as the photographs.
All right, then I'm going to eat some chicken wings while I watch.
Please do.
Ooh, fog. So foggy.
Those clouds are nuts.
Yeah. Those are multiple different shader packs I used.
Nice transition back, using the cathedral as a wipe.
So David and Zack just watched the video I posted on YouTube for the Acropolis, which itself was a big effort to get all the shots filmed and then all the footage spliced in certain ways, which I'll talk about in just a moment. But probably most prominent are, again, those gorgeous clouds that come from some of the newer shader packs. There's a new shader pack that I really like called Bliss Shaders, which just does probably the best clouds I've ever seen in any shader pack. It doesn't do the best at everything. Like, I don't like the way it handles shadows sort of normally on the buildings. I actually prefer just the more traditional shader packs, like complementary shaders for that. So actually, I think I did a pretty good job of this. I used Adobe Premiere to actually splice for most of the shots a foreground and a background. And the backgrounds of a lot of the shots are the bliss shaders with the clouds. And the foregrounds are actually complementary shaders, which was 2 independently filmed pieces of footage. And then Adobe could kind of do a green screen effect where I'd say, cut out the sky here and have this background. And since they were both exactly filmed at the same camera path, you can't tell the difference or at least you have a hard time telling the difference between the foreground and the background. So that was a lot of fun to play around with.
This may be just because I am quite tired. So I will just say, I know I enjoy making fun of you and your levels of insanity on these things, but that was truly gorgeous. That was a very beautifully shot video, both in terms of the build itself, of course, that we've been talking about for over an hour, but the production of that video itself, marvelously done. I totally can see how that would take a lot of time, but I am curious what in particular takes the time in putting together something like that.
So part of that, again, was a lot of these mods are very new. Like Distant Horizons is a very new mod that's still an alpha stage that lets you get those crazy far camera paths. just figuring out how one mod interacts with another mod. Will these mods play nicely together? Will they not play nicely together? Which version of which mod plays nicely together? There's so much trial and error, like, oh, that worked. Oh, that didn't work. So that took a couple months of just playing with mods and getting them to work just right.
When you say trial and error, do you mean like rendering a video of the full path and seeing if it looks the way you want it?
Yep.
So like figuring out the path itself, relatively straightforward at this point because you've done it enough times.
Yeah, I got the path probably in a week or so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then your level of perfection is just, that's not looking the way that I'm envisioning it in my head.
But you could get a lot of artifacts, right? Like, again, these mods don't always play nicely together, so you might have a weird flickering effect where suddenly, that background's flickering. It's just suddenly not there. And it's like, that's not going to work.
Got it.
And in fact, one thing that I finally realized was the proper way I should really always do my future videos is I exported the files as image sequences of PNGs, which is a crazy file size. Like, I end up with basically like 0.5 terabyte per footage, but then I can compress that into a normal editable video file, like a QuickTime ProRes file. But the thing is, when you export it to a PNG sequence, there is no loss in quality. There's no compression artifacts. And if you try to export it into a normal like H.264, you just have tons of compression artifacts for driving me crazy. So I was able to sort of overcome that. But you have to sort of work out through the hard drive space to make that work.
I understood half those words.
So do you have like 4 or 5 NASs, or like what do you got going?
I need a NAS, but I mostly work with just individual external hard drives that are about 5 terabytes each. And I just plug one and plug another one in as I go.
I'm not joking when I say that he has computers running 24/7 rendering things.
Yeah. I've got actually more screenshots rendering right now on my rendering laptop.
It's also hilarious that it's a rendering laptop, which you must be the only person in the universe who has a rendering laptop.
I know, right?
Yeah, do you have like an external NVIDIA 5090 or something?
No, I'm going to get a new computer at some point here. There's just a lot of complications right now, but...
It will also be a laptop though, right? Or are you actually...
No, actually, I think I am going to get a PC tower.
Oh, okay.
Probably, because, again, I didn't know I was going to do any of this. Like, I haven't gotten a new computer since I started playing Minecraft again in the beginning of the pandemic. So it's time that I got a new machine. A lot of this was done on, like 2020 or older tech. But now that you've seen it, and David, I appreciate your kind words. Does this mean I am 100% forgiven for my delay on the 2-to-1 build?
Absolutely not. Not even close. Nice try.
That's it for now. Check out our podcast website at cathedraltalk.fm. There you will find many architectural visuals and Minecraft goodies. If you would like to support our efforts here at Cathedral Talk to aid in the restoration of Notre Dame, please use the direct link on our website to donate to friendsofnotredamedeparis.org. Friends of Notre Dame is a non-profit organization that is leading the international fundraising efforts to rebuild and restore Notre Dame Cathedral. By donating to them through the link at cathedraltalk.fm, we'll know that our podcast is reaching new patrons. As our own Minecraft project progresses, we'll be sure to share plans, screenshots, and videos for your own visual palette. Good day and happy building.